Hello, I'm Nancy Falstick, tuning in from California. I mostly want to listen and support this effort. I'm the director of a climate action organization called Regeneration, or Regeneración in Spanish.
Okay. Oh, that's so nice of you to come and watch and listen in. I've heard a lot of good things about, Regeneración in Spanish. So I'm thrilled to have you here. Seeing as it's 5 minutes past, I'm going to start the discussion. So if people might join in or leave as time goes, but that's just normal, especially on the internet with so many internet issues, unfortunately. So where do we go? So hi everyone, thanks for joining. This is an open forum discussion by MUN Impact, which is a global youth NGO that advances moderate United Nations and the UN Sustainable Development Goals through virtual programs and events such as this one. Today, as part of our Global Week of Action, we'll be hosting a discussion, open forum discussion on the intersectionality of climate and gender issues. So I'll be providing just some starting questions, and then you can all jump in and say what you think, what you see happening in the future, and just some answers so we can get this discussion going. So I'm going to just start off fairly simple with, in what ways do you think climate and gender issues intersect? So feel free to just unmute your mics and grace us with your voices, please. You can also type in the chat if some of your microphones don't work. I'll be sending a message in the chat with the question as well, because I am aware that I am a native English speaker, so I speak kind of fast, probably faster than I should most times. So it's in the chat, so you can read at your own leisure, and feel free to just go ahead. Yeah, I see hand raise. Abhirav, if I'm not mispronouncing that too badly.
Yes, that's correct. As far as the climate and the gender issues go, I don't think they are much related, mostly polar opposites of each other. Gender issues, I think, is mostly a socio-cultural issue, while the climate change is an environmental issue. And as far as I have attended the workshop, we as humans have exhausted our limit in the climate sector. So we are branching out of the main branch and inspecting other sectors, and we tend to group these two separate issues we have here. So I think they're not much related. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else want to agree or disagree? I mean, personally, I do think that they intersect. There was a workshop, I think yesterday, where we discussed this. And as you mentioned, like gender issues are a very social issue, and the environment is clearly an environmental issue. But when these become, especially when the issues such as water becomes a societal issue, that's, I think, when you can start and see and intersect more, because stereotypically it has been the women who's responsible for the household, and one of those household tasks is to go and get water. So maybe looking at it from that perspective, you can see overlap, but feel free to disagree, or if somebody else has something to say. Yeah,
I could add a little. Yeah, I would say that as people, we're inherently all human beings, but that in pretty much every society, women and men are socialized really differently. And because of that, our role in relationship to the environment is different. And women and girls as a group are the largest group that's being disproportionately affected, I would say, by the climate crisis. Women, and there's what they call the feminization of poverty, where more of the people who are poor are female in the world. And again, it's about socialization, but when you look at the industries and the practices that have contributed to the destruction of the environment, they're mostly run by men. And women and girls are raised to nurture life, protect life, take care of life. And it's one of the reasons why I think leadership of girls and women for the climate movement is just absolutely essential.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think maybe from a more Western perspective, which is unfortunately one that is taken quite often, small issues such as menstruation, which can lead to a lot of, rubbish and excess plastic being used, and the extra hygiene that is required, that is something which is very evident here in Western cultures, where we have running water, we have very accessible to all our needs. So reading the literature, you can see that issue being exacerbated in places in rural communities where water is quite scarce or requires more effort to be acquired. I saw that OBASI John introduced himself in the chat, so maybe do you want to take a step and offer your views on the question? It's in the chat up above if you weren't here when I read it out. You can also put in the chat if you want. I know that does take some more time. Okay. Maybe we can take a different angle from this. Maybe we can do it that way so that we can have a discussion, just because these are open forums. So we want to encourage everybody that's here to speak. So the question is, what do you think some of the ways in which climate and gender issues interact?
I'm not very clear with this. Sorry, did you say something?
Please go for it.
Okay, I'm not very clear with this, but I think that since men are like most of the men are working, and the proportion of men and working men is more than working women. So all that happens in the environment, like global warming, not exactly global warming, but the pollution, the effects of pollution are faced more by men rather than women, because they are more they are exposed more to the environment. When women are at home, they are not so exposed to the pollution.
Sorry, I was just admitting a couple more people are joining. Yeah, I think that's definitely a very good point, that women are usually stuck in the house or are being delegated to childcare and just household tasks. Yeah, I can see Abribat, you've raised your hand.
I think we as humans are affected by the climate change, not separately as a man or a female, because as a man toils in the industry, working for their realm, the woman takes care of the household, and they are exposed to various hazards, such as in many countries still wood burn stoves and other gas stoves, harmful kerosene stoves are still prevalent. So rather than feminizing or masculating the situation, we must look into it as a common perspective rather than a branch perspective.
Yeah, I think something we can all agree on, like regardless of what you think, is that gender, everybody is affected by climate change, regardless of where you live, what you do. If you're a woman in rural India, or if you're a working businessman in London, you're still going to be affected by it. And I think that is something that we'll acknowledge, and something that really should be motivating us to take a stance, because we are all impacted. We should all be taking steps. But maybe for me, by dividing it into smaller like categories, such as like women in rural areas where access to water isn't as common, then you can slowly like target that bit. So you're taking a few steps. And I think that's mainly the goal, rather than like make climate change a masculine issue or like a feminine issue. That's, at least when I discuss this kind of thing, that's the perspective I take. But yes, definitely, I do think that climate change, it does affect everyone, and we should all be taking steps towards it. Does anybody else want to say something? If not, I can move on to a different question if maybe this question isn't for you. Just sort of connected, this is the questions in the chat as well. So how do certain cultural factors put women at a greater risk in climate disasters? And maybe you should also add if you believe that women are, because that's something we've just been discussing. Yeah, Abriba? Oh,
Yes, up to some extent, the women are more affected as not per se for the climate change, but as the effect of climate change. The catastrophe which follows the climate change is more affecting the women, as in most of the cultures, especially the non-Western cultures, women are meant for the household, and does do not have any vocation or education per se. So and since we cannot since we cannot change the whole culture per se, but we can take steps to bring the women so they can persist even without existence of a man. Yes.
Unmuting myself is probably a good idea. Yeah, so I can see Akshira has her hand raised, or their hand raised. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, I would like to just say that I think I believe and agree with what the question is, because definitely women are at the receiver's end of the disasters of climate change. As we know here, if you have idea about a region called Rajasthan, where women do their household work, and for that they have to fetch water, and they have to travel to long distances to collect water because the water resources are very less and they're very scarce. So definitely women are at the receiver's end. And in the case of natural disasters, the calamities, there also, I think women are damaged. They receive more damage as compared to men. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Do you perhaps have some idea, not to put you on the spot, but some idea of how maybe we could take steps to solve these? Not necessarily a whole policy brief on behalf of the Indian government, but some small steps that maybe we could be taking. Yeah, Akshira?
I think if we concentrate more on girl education in terms of climate, its maintenance, sustenance, and its impact, like disastrous impact, then I think we will be better able to inculcate the knowledge and sustenance in maintaining the environment. Because I think at the ground level, it's the females who are working. because men usually go for business. They are working like to earn money, but it is the female who is directly in contact with the environment. That is what I think.
Yeah. Do you think that maybe having more representation of women higher up so that their opinions are heard, do you think that would help, or do you think that that might be a bit, maybe a step too far or not?
No, definitely. In order to be heard, we have to have more representation of female at every level, at national as well as international level. More the representation, our voice will be heard more. I'm not saying because I'm a woman, but I think that is the way, that's the way out.
Yeah, I think that is something that I've seen a lot. Is it simply more representation does help, more diversity in general, because the stereotype, of like a fairly old white man being in power is something that has been prolonged, and their perspectives are kind of narrow or very specific. So, by changing that up slightly, hopefully we can get more diverse solutions that are better for everyone. I can see, I think I pronounce your name wrong every time. I'm so sorry. Abhirav, your hand up?
Yes, it is correct pronunciation. And yes, girl education is a step we should take, but it's a step which will bear fruit in the long term. Meanwhile, what to do with the women who have already grown up and tied to the responsibilities of the household? I am talking about the women above 18. So they cannot go to an institution, academic institution per se, because they are tied to responsibilities with the family or home. So therefore, we should provide them vocational training, not hi-fi vocational training such as coding and etc., but like sewing and making handicrafts, etc., etc. Yes, and as per representation goes, I think there should be and always an order of merit, and one should not get a post just because their orientation, but because of their merit. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, thanks so much. We would love to hear from everyone in the room. So please don't be afraid. We all understand that these issues are very large. Your perspective may be different. And also, if English isn't your first language, please don't be concerned. For many of us, English isn't our first language. So we understand where you're coming from. So would somebody else like to discuss that? Because maybe a different perspective might be useful. Maybe simply accessibility of all these, especially of water, which we seem to discuss quite a bit. Maybe I saw that Neha, you had your Neha, you had your camera on. Maybe do you want to say something?
I was not sure about the topic.
Yes, okay, so we're discussing sort of what cultural factors make women more at risk in climate disasters, or like in general climate change.
In water and sanitation?
In general, but if water and sanitation is the topic you're most familiar with or you've seen the most, you can definitely talk about that. I see the OBASI, John, you've raised your hand.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. My name is OBASI John. I'm speaking from Nigeria. Right now, our time is 3:24. I want the question, although the questions are technical, but I'll attempt in my own idea. You see, I can say that climate change threatens to widen an existing gender-based health therapy. It has a very important role to play in our health, especially in low and middle income countries. So secondly, also, we see empowering women as educators, holders of knowledge, and agents of social change can improve mitigation and adaptation policy in intervention. So it has a very important role to play in the area of health and also in the area of improving mitigation and adaptation policy. Thank you so much. I think this is a little one I can contribute. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving your perspective. I see that Rita, you've joined and got your camera on. Maybe do you want to say something? The question, just to repeat, is how do certain cultural factors put women at a greater risk in climate disasters?
Yeah, sure. So I think that, especially in countries where culturally women aren't allowed to go to school and pursue an education, sometimes climate change can hinder progress in getting women their education and etc. Because when there's a natural disaster like a flood, or sometimes floods go on for months and weeks and etc. And that makes it so women can't go to school, which hinders the progress. So, and that's also something with other climate change is also linked with pandemics and etc. And when there's a pandemic and women need to stay home because of quarantine and because of lockdowns and etc. And it's in a country where women's education isn't valued as much and isn't something that is really in progress, or that's something that is it's an issue, so to speak. Sometimes that also hinders progress in education, etc. So that's also something to consider when we are speaking about climate change and how it disproportionately affects women, which it definitely does according to research and etc.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And maybe that point. Okay, I was muted. I'm so sorry. Okay, I definitely agree. And that point actually connects very well to the following question that we have. These are guiding questions, so they don't have to be specific responses. I see somebody has messaged me privately with their response. So I'm going to read it out, and then this person can say if they wish to remain anonymous or if they wish to further explain their point. So it says, and I quote, "Their responsibility towards family is the major factor which puts them at risk, but technically it's not their responsibility. It is a responsibility of the men as well. So they both should be taught to distribute responsibilities, and they should be treated equally, ending the stereotypes." So if you wrote that and would like to further your point, please speak up. Okay, well, that's fine. I think it's a very good contribution anyways. And something that maybe Abhirav has mentioned before is that while it does disproportionately affect people, it is not per se a gendered issue. It does affect us all at the same time. So that's a very good point. And I noticed, Rita, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, it was to answer the next question. May I go?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely super important to have more female voices in climate policy and science. So I think it's German philosopher Thomas Kuhn theorized that science develops itself according to inside a paradigm. I think it's how you pronounce it. So and it's related to that paradigm. And in order to have a science that is built for that applies to women, and that it's built in a way that takes into consideration gender issues. It's important to have women in science and in climate policy. Furthermore, I think culture and where we come from, and our background as people and the experiences we live in and the things we have learned, it all affects how we perceive issues and how we conduct science and research. So having women in science spaces and policy spaces, especially related to climate, it's super important in order to have more different perspectives, more people who can look at an issue from a different point of view and say, hey, I think we haven't considered XY solution yet. I think we haven't considered XYZ problem or hypothesis. So having women in these places, it's not only important for a matter of equality, because of course women should have just as much as a right as men to be in policy and in science and as much opportunity. It is important and essential to everyone, even to men, so we can solve this issue quicker and in a more intersectional way, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I see Abhirav, you have your hand raised, and in the meantime, you can all think of different points. I see some of you are turning your cameras on or texting and chatting in the chat. So feel free to just speak up if you have a functioning microphone. In the meantime, you have the floor.
Yes. I don't think any of the renowned academic institution discriminates with the education of men and women. So therefore, the one who is competent must get the place. And let meritariate, there should be order of merit or the order of orientation. However, if the decision is specifically concerning to the women, the resolution the committee will be drafting must be put forth to them and let them decide if the implication of that resolution takes place or not. But according to my opinion, uh, as the first world people said, is that there should be no kind of reservations or any type of advantage in the forming committee, as it will be directly affecting the policy which on which we would act. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the key issue, maybe as I'm personally a university student and I do a fairly male-dominated degree. I am in the field of security studies, terrorism, that kind of thing. And while maybe theoretically there isn't maybe a disbalance between genders, in practice there generally is, because people are more concerned that if they bring on somebody different, it might ruin the systems, or even simply names that can sometimes put people off. It's not maybe on purpose, it can be an internal bias. If you're used to spending your life working in academics with people named John and Patrick and Bob, maybe somebody coming along with a different name might be concerning or might ring off some alarm bells. I see also the OBASI John has put in the chat, so maybe take 30 seconds to read that, and then I see that Rita, your hand is raised.
Yeah, and I think everyone is presenting excellent points. I do believe that science is also a way to advance female empowerment, and that's another reason why we should have women in the climate science field and in climate policy. Also, but what are some ways that we can get women into these fields? Because we can just force women to do this. I think the answer would go something like, firstly, try and decrease the amount of sexism and misogyny that you will encounter in the science field. Also, I saw a scientist the other day, a female scientist, talking about how women are kind of drawn off science and like are deviate from science and don't do science, because science exercises and science textbooks are catered towards men. Like the exercises reference male dominated activities like football and Pokemon cards, the exercises like. And I thought that was interesting, although I don't know how much impact that has in having women drawn off and losing interest in the science field. But I think it's just creating initiatives that give women an opportunity to go into the science field or to experiment with science when they are younger. So university scholarships, science programs for girls, which there are plenty of them nowadays. I think they just need to be more publicized, and perhaps we need to encourage girls to participate in them more. Be it like, I don't know, just presenting also girls with role models in science, because when I think about women scientists, maybe one or two come to mind, people that I know in real life, maybe one or two public figures. But when we think about science, we tend to think about men. So those are all ways that we can get maybe girls into the science field. And I think that climate change is something that is going to draw a lot of women into science, because one of the faces of the climate change movement is obviously Greta Thunberg, who is a girl. And by like showing that we can have women in these spaces related to climate change and etc., and activism and science and policymaking, that it's super important to have people aware and working on these issues. We may actually get more girls to go into science in the next like 5 or 6 years, and go into science to fight climate change, to fight all of these issues like pandemics, climate change, etc., that we are facing right now. So I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, that's my opinion on that.
Yeah, I think one of the key issues, which you've just hinted at, is that more or less the population worldwide is 50-50-ish, give or take a couple percentages. But like as you go up the ages and this system, like women tend to trickle out and choose different degrees or different perspectives, or enjoy something different, which is inherently fine. But then when you get quite high up and you get to university level and like professor level, for instance, at many very reputable academic institutions who do research, like 20%, 27% of people are females, like lecturers, professional lecturers, tenured lecturers. And while of course it should be all merit and you should just give somebody a position because they're a woman or because they're going to be your token diversity person, you should also maybe it should be considered that maybe there's only a pool of males to choose from because everybody was discouraged from a young age. For me, yeah, go ahead.
I think you bring up an excellent point, but it's just like not the question of giving women these jobs without them deserving them. It's the question of encouraging women to pursue these careers, or to, if they are interested in them, and like not dropping off because they're intimidated by their male peers, or because their male peers distrust them, and the field there's a lot of misogyny in the field. But also the question of giving girls opportunities, because there are tons like low-income girls and girls who live in countries where it's harder to pursue a career after you finish a certain degree of school, like some countries high school, some countries less. Creating opportunities for these girls to pursue STEM and to pursue science is also, it's something we should do, so everyone has the opportunity to rise in the field and look for and be able to work their way to the top and to get a degree in science and policy, because it's climate policy also we are talking about. So yeah.
Definitely. I see that Miss Nancy has put a text in the chat. Does possibly Arunima, do you want to say something? I know you were listening in earlier.
All of you put up like great points, but I can't actually, come up with something. Sorry.
That's perfectly fine. Neha, do you want to say something, maybe?
No, not yet.
Okay. I see that we also have Anuksha here, Shreya, Akshira. Any of you? You can come back to any of the points. If the original question was interesting to you, you can go back to that. This is not a set, this is not a lecture. Yeah, Arunima, I see that you've raised your hand.
Yeah, so I just came up with something. And it's like we are going more towards educating females, right? So that is something that every country has recognized in some sense or the other. And that's nothing to do with climate, like which was our initial topic, but it's something really essential because education is like everything. Get my point, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, education is one of the biggest issues, but as the SDGs highlight, it's not the only issue, and everything is very much interconnected. Oh, Shreya, I see you raise your hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I believe that it's important for women to raise their voices in climate policy because women are more vulnerable to the crisis and they have most experience about it. So I think having and gaining and inculcating the knowledge of their experience of the crisis might improve the policies and also the science.
Rose, you're muted. Akshira, do you have something else to say?
Yeah, I would like to say that I think education is not the point of discussion. This is a proven fact that education will definitely help in climate change when people are sensitized about it, being it male or a female. Definitely female educated, if an educated female is there, she will definitely be more helpful in balancing the climate. But we should also discuss about how to educate and what to educate. If we are planning to bring about some change, so a correct and proper planning should be there about how to bring about that change.
Yeah, definitely. I think taking actual action is one of the best ways we're gonna get rid, because you can do a lot of talking, but if you're not doing a lot of doing, we're not getting very far. I see Sana, you just joined. Hi, welcome. We're just discussing sort of the connection between gender and climate change. So do you have any thoughts or something you'd like to bring up? You can also use the chat if your microphone isn't working or you just simply don't feel comfortable. I do also encourage you all to read the chat. Miss Nancy from Regeneración, which is a climate change organization, which Onion Impact works quite a lot with, is actually providing some insight in the chat. So that could be some guidance for you, maybe. I can see that Rita is got her hand raised, and then I can give the floor to Abira, and please, everybody else, I encourage you to take part.
So tying back with what Akshira, I hope I pronounced your name right, just said, yeah, education is very important to solving climate change. I'd say that tying with also what he said, it does lack of access to education disproportionately affects women for cultural reasons sometimes, and for sometimes because of period poverty and etc. But I think it's not, and like I think it's very interesting what you said, because Education isn't just essential to solve climate change in the sense that it allows girls and people in general to join the field of science and policy to work on climate change. I think when we are educated about something, regardless of which career we are in, be it art, be it anything else, we are aware of why and how things are happening, which empowers us to being informed empowers us to take action, like understand how we individually can make change and can act, even if it's just like in our day-to-day life, being less wasteful and taking public transport more, how we can like contribute to not at least not making this a bigger issue than it already is. And also it allows us to keep our governments and corporations accountable, because when we know why it's bad, and we know that corporations and governments are a huge part of climate change, and even if we change everything we do at an individual level, if we don't bring corporations into this and force change in what they do, we are not solving anything. So I think education in general, not just like at a higher level, but like at a lower level, and in like primary school and etc., and getting people to understand the issue is empowering, because it probably will make it more likely that people take action and work to solve this issue, even if they're not pursuing a career in that field, like science and etc.
Yeah, definitely. Abira, do you still have your point?
Yes. I do think that education of the women will play an important role in climate change, but I propose that this kind of education must not only be on the curriculum or this academic level, but we should also involve the state machinery and the international machinery for propaganda to get involved and spread the message better. Also, many vernacular plays and other acts which reach out to the remote communities better are important, because as the women are invested in the household work, they unknowingly sometimes perform several things which have an alternative to it, and those things are also harmful to the nature, such as wood burning stoves are a big concern. So the state should get involved in spreading of information, and state and us on the individual level should spread the message. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Maybe I'm just going to throw quite a big curveball here. I'm going to pivot the conversation completely, and I'm going to just add in a different social issue here, which is decolonization. Look at that. So, especially in very Western environments, for instance, I grew up in Spain and I now live in the Netherlands, which are predominantly very white, very Western. They focus very much on like Brussels politics and not much beyond that. We do have these certain stereotypes and perspectives of how the rest of the world works. You know, the very traditional stereotypes that, you know, people in Africa just live around, don't have money, and they just have to do what they can, and, you know, things like that. Or like people in India are very dirty because, you know, they can't be bothered to shower. Stereotypes which are very harmful both to the cultures involved, but also we're not really understanding their situation, which means you can't address an issue if you don't understand it very well. For instance, for potentially pure hygiene, proper hygiene, regardless of where you are, that's a key step both for climate change, and it also helps prevent the spreads of viruses and potential future pandemics. So how would you all go around that beyond education? Because reducing evidence of these stereotypes in textbooks is one clear way, but what other steps can you see that we can take? I'm just going to give you all a couple seconds to think about that, because that was a major shift. I do understand. Yeah, so more concisely is, how would you go around changing or reducing the stereotypes that impede us from understanding how climate change is actually affecting, without simply changing the education? So instead of just changing the curriculum at a state level, what else can we do to understand and learn about what actually is happening in the rest of the world? Akshira, I see you've raised your hand.
I think we can make use of social media. See, people have their own idols. If we convince the idols and we sensitize them about the issue, then they can lead a masses of people. Like they will be the guiding stars. If what my star is doing, I'll do the same thing. It can be anyone. Different cultures have different people as their idols. So if they are going to say anything to their followers, definitely a change will ensure.
Definitely. I'm just typing out the question in the chat because somebody has asked me and I do understand. In the meantime, Rita, do you want to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I have two things to say, and one might not be the answering directly your question, Rosie. Sorry. So actually, I think we are living through a major cultural revolution where we are becoming more and more aware of the importance of dismantling stereotypes and having a larger cultural understanding of how people live and of other people's cultures. So in the media, we are seeing more and more, I think we should strive at least to see more and more own voices stories by people who aren't Western, white, and like the norm. And I think that applies to women as well. I think we should also see more stories that are created by women with their gaze and perspective. And so we should strive to continue this movement of wanting to see accurate and de-stereotyped versions of how people live in other cultures in the media. Also, and regarding decolonization of climate change, I think something that we should really take into consideration is that some of the people who have been fighting climate change and environmental issues for the longest time are indigenous people. So it is super important to bring indigenous people into conversations on climate change and on environmentalism in general, which is something that we often don't do because we associate the face of the climate change movement with Greta Thunberg and with Jane Fonda, and other activists, which are great activists. Don't get me wrong. We should also take into consideration that this movement has been going on. The idea of protecting the earth and that of preventing climate change has been defended by these people for years, and that they have been defending and protecting the earth in the Americas, especially, in their places for the longest time are the indigenous people. So they should be on the forefront of the conversation, and we should definitely take their opinions into high consideration and regard them highly.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, exactly. One of the key examples that we were talking about yesterday in the workshop that was about this issue was that women have tended to be traditionally, and especially Native American or indigenous women specifically, have tended to be the ones that face them. And one of the reasons this could be was because they are very oppressed. So that is their only way to hear their opinion, because through formal routes, they aren't able to do so. I do see that Abhirav, your hand is raised. So I'm going to take this final opportunity to just say that this will be the final point, and then we can just all give some closing statements about what you've learned, what we can address in the future, and any constructive feedback for the open session. This is a learning opportunity, so I, along with everybody else here, is trying to learn and enjoy themselves. So that being said, the floor is yours, Abhirav.
Yes, am I audible? I think I am, yes. The culture aspect is not the main concern for the environmental consequences, as in many parts, not only here in India, but in the overall world, the culture of the people have been so diluted by these uh, very diluted as virtue to the time that it's not that important. And secondly, as per the leadership, without any irony, I don't think that Greta Thunberg is a good face for the moment, because who is going to listen to a underage school-going girl? The people would rather listen to a more influential person, the person who is more qualified on that particular subject. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay, so thank you. Thank you so much. I do see where all these perspectives are coming on from, and it's very nice to hear, sometimes to challenge your own thoughts. So please, I do see a couple, one hand raised, so please just unmute yourselves and say if you enjoyed it, if you've learned anything, and any constructive feedback, please. Thank you. Abashi John, I see you have your hand raised. Is this an accident?
Okay, please, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, quickly, I have some items here on my list. One of the ways, I think number one, there should be a community advocacy where we go to the community to create awareness of this particular situation. Number two is that the government policy should be implemented. If we bring in the government laws that will regulate this cultural discussion, I think it will have a long way. So, and also there should be a face-to-face interaction to the general public. We should, like our sisters say, we should involve the social media. That one is also there, and also there should be a face-to-face interaction. So that's one or two things I have to say on this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just reposting now in the chat. Here you go. This is by Miss Nancy's organization, Regeneración. They also hosted a discussion. So if you want to continue to challenge your perspectives and views, please take a look at them. They also do other amazing work on the side. And as I've mentioned before, they are great partners with Indian Impact, and the visions carry over quite well. So I'm sure she'll be happy to give any contact information at the end. Saying that, I can see your hand is raised, Miss Nancy, if you want to take the floor.
Thank you, Rosemary. I want to appreciate your really beautiful and welcoming facilitation of this. Just excellent questions and encouragement of different voices. And I loved hearing everybody who spoke or wrote their thoughts, and want to encourage you all to, see yourselves as leaders and have an impact in your local communities as well as in the world. One thought for the future could be to put people into breakout groups for a small part of the time, because sometimes that's an easier way for everybody to share some thoughts if the whole group feels for whatever reason not comfortable. But beautiful job. I'm delighted to meet you all.
Thank you. It was actually nice to put a face to the foundation, to the organization, actually. after so much of hearing the name. And yeah, I think breakout rooms could be something to consider. I actually hadn't crossed my mind, and now I'm going to regret that. So I'm going to write it down for future events. In the meantime, you are all free to go. I'm going to end. Well, that's a lie. We need to take a picture just for social media and promotions. So on the count of 3, well, please turn on your cameras and please all pretend to be happy to be here. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, perfect. We got it. So thank you so much for joining. I'm going to end the recording.